Welcome back to another Sunday walk video. Yeah, so there's a lot there's a lot to talk about, a lot to digest based on last week. A lot of thoughts swirling in my head. A lot of people have come out and said what they're thinking. So there's a lot to digest about short-term implications of the tariffs, long-term implications of the tariffs. Was this all done intentionally? Was it not? When is it going to end? And what about Bitcoin? So let's start out. I don't know where to start out. Let's start out with Bitcoin, I guess. Right before, today, on Sunday, I am back home. Bitcoin today had a nasty fall, about $4,000 to $5,000 off. It was like hovering right around 83, 84. It was doing well. Obviously, last week, I was very enthusiastic. On Friday, I told you guys we were in a best case scenario. The stock market crashed for 2 straight days. Thursday, Friday, we lost approximately in total like $4 trillion, close to that. Totally wiped out from the US markets. And if you're just looking at Mag 7 alone, close to 2 trillion, so like about half of that within just 2 days of trading. And during those 2 days, Bitcoin did not move. We stayed right at that 82, 83,000 mark. And in fact, on Friday, we actually ticked up a little bit to about 84,000. So I said, best case scenario, it showed seller exhaustion definitely kicked in. And we definitely still have a ton of people, long-term holders, miners, public trade companies, institutions still loading up, obviously offsetting the panic sellers. So we were looking good. This weekend we were holding until about a few hours ago. We saw Bitcoin dip right back down to about 78,000, which was a level we saw before, and now we're climbing back up 79-ish. And by the time this video released, we could be back in the 80s again. So what I saw, really no reason. I was searching, everyone else was searching, really. It seemed like it could be just part of whale games. We had about 200 to 250 million worth of longs liquidated. So could have been intentional just to wipe out the leverage once again before we reset for this week. Totally plausible. But there is one other thing that could be in play, and that is what's coming up on Monday and this week. And that gets to some of the other things I want to talk about, right? But overall, my stance has not changed about Bitcoin. I think last week showed, again, how strong Bitcoin is right now. Yes, we are in the low 80s. I recognize that, but seeing how much the US markets have sold off, seeing how much the European markets have sold off and the Asian markets have sold off last week because of all the tariff stuff, and for Bitcoin and the rest of crypto really to just hold at that level and not go any lower, that's very, very encouraging and awesome. And like I've been saying last week, if we could continue to hold at this level and even build from this level and go upwards, that is the best case scenario. Best case scenario. Because if you're looking at outside of crypto, man, it's an absolute shit show. And everyone is trying to find rhyme and reason. Everyone is trying to pinpoint exactly why things are being done. And I've listened to a lot of analysts during my vacation over this weekend, a lot of analysts, a lot of podcasts, a lot of just people talking and sharing their perspectives. And, you know, who knows if any of them are right or partially right, or maybe they're completely wrong. You know, I'm going to put it all together. But a couple things. Number one, I did share on Friday, I think Friday, yes, that Trump tweeted out something on Truth Social about some other person saying that Trump basically is intentionally crashing the stock market. Okay, that's something that I've said. A lot of other people have theorized this because it makes a lot of sense. Why do you want to cause a lot of confusion? Why do you want to crash the stock market? Well, by crashing the stock market, you bring down the 10-year yield, which is great for all the maturing bonds. There's mixed numbers. I'm hearing anywhere from 6 trillion to 10 trillion within the next 6 to 12 months. And we're able to issue more bonds at lower rates. Essentially, it's going to help the country save hundreds of billions of dollars over the next 10 years, possibly even more than that, just with interest payments alone. So it makes sense to bring down the 10-year yield immediately. And the best way to do that is to crash markets and cause economic turmoil. Also, it was stated that, hey, if you apply all this chaos, it's going to force Fed Chair Powell to cut the Fed fund rate, which we're all looking forward to. He already said in the last FOMC meeting there will be 2 cuts. Now there are estimates that there may be more than 2 cuts. There could be 3. There could be 4 this year. Right? I have my doubts about that. I don't think it's going to be 4. I still think it's going to be 2. Because inflation is going to be going up. Prices of goods will be going up, even though they may be temporary. And I get the technical definition of inflation is due to bad monetary policy versus just price hikes due to tariffs. I get the difference, but in terms of measuring year to year or month to month prices with CPI, PCE, there's not going to be a difference. So inflation is going to be going up for quite some time. And if inflation is going upwards, Powell is not going to be able to cut rates aggressively like he did in previous years when we were still very elevated and inflation was coming down. So I think he's going to stick with his game plan and cut 2. But what all the turmoil and stuff could do is make his cuts more accelerated, meaning a timeline will be cut. So we may get one in May rather than June, and the next one comes sooner than that, right? So that's another reason why you want the market to crash. So going back to what Trump tweeted, he basically tweeted this on Truth Social from this one other person, and this got a lot of people to think that, well, then this theory is accurate. This is why he's doing it. And I said that too, right? But today, a White House economic advisor, I don't know who, wasn't Lutnick or Benson, said that no, he's not doing that on purpose. So, is he telling the truth? Or is he trying to cover up the truth? Because if that is the plan, If the plan is to disrupt the markets and just cause it to crash, if you reveal that plan, then it becomes less effective, right? So I could see how the White House would come out and say, well, no, that's not the plan. But I don't know. Now that I've given it more thought, I don't think it's the entire plan, but I definitely think this was part of the plan because, again, Lutnick, Wall Street Shark, Benson, Wall Street Shark, they know how to play the game. They've been playing this game for decades. Okay, so this is in their wheelhouse. So was this part of the plan, not the full plan? I could definitely see it. Now, what's the other part of the plan? Okay, now I'm theorizing. The other part of the plan is basically, I think Trump just thinking that all the tariff stuff is going to be good long term for the country, right? Because what do the tariffs do? They're going to force a lot of companies to produce here, make their products here, hire a lot of people here, right? Bring the jobs back, bring the manufacturing back, make America strong again, which is great. That's part of the plan. Also, part of the plan is probably to even out the trade. There are trade deficits, definitely between countries, and maybe we have let that slide for way too long. So maybe this is a way to even that out. I can see that. So if you put all these three together, maybe that's the master plan, right? However, the counterpoint to this is the execution has been very, very flawed. Those goals to this plan, could end up work, right? Could end up playing out, and yes. But the execution of how it's all being done right now, how it's being presented, how accelerated things are, is causing a lot of head scratching, a lot of turmoil, and a lot of people to not really recognize what's happening. So I saw one person make this really, really accurate statement. Even though, and I'm paraphrasing, a lot of people probably voted Trump in because they were in a bad financial situation and they expected him to fix the economy, right? They expected immediate results and they wanted to see their financial situation improve. And Trump may be doing that, may be working on that. But because of all the things that are happening right now, people are starting to basically starting to turn on him, starting to get angry, starting to basically give up hope, and basically they just didn't sign up for this, right? So yes, even though the plan may be more prosperity for the economy, for the country, long term, but short term, the short term pain, right? Higher prices, the inability to now buy stuff, buy a new car, or take vacations, or buy whatever, because prices have gone up, or because you have now been laid off, the short-term situation sucks. And obviously, if your 401k or your retirement funds have dropped in half because of the stock market crash, that sucks. That affects a lot of people. I remember back in 2008, when I was still working, when we had the housing crash, I was working with older people that said that they couldn't retire because their retirement funds basically got cut in half and they didn't have enough to retire. And unfortunately, it seems like we're going through one of those situations now, right? And for people that just have investments, obviously, stocks and crypto alike, it's never fun to see your investments go down 30, 40, 50% in just a couple of months. So a lot of people, they just don't understand. They didn't sign up for this, right? So that's what I heard, and I think a lot of people are feeling this. Even though they may not understand the plan, or even though they understand the plan, it doesn't matter because people didn't sign up for the mass chaos that is being done right now, right? Now, there are many individuals that don't care because they're in a very good financial situation and they can, they don't have to care. They can live out their days and just wait it out. And actually, you know what? Take advantage. That's great. But there are many that are suffering. And that's why we have so many people that are so upset and angry right now. And part of the failed execution is the explaining of the tariffs too. So many people started looking at the tariff sign that Trump was holding, trying to say, well, these are the countries that have been unfairly tariffing the United States, so these are the reciprocal tariffs. It wasn't until later that people figured out that the tariffs that he put on the sign wasn't actually the real tariffs placed on U.S. goods. It was actually this formula that the White House came up with, which is to look at basically the imports divided by the exports, and you divide that by 2. So basically, you're looking at a trade deficit between that country and the United States, and they made that into the quote-unquote tariff against the U.S. goods, which doesn't make any sense at all. It has nothing to do with it, because there's many countries that we buy from that we don't sell to, and that's intentional. And it's not because they don't want to buy our goods. It's just because we have nothing that we sell to them and nothing that they can buy from us. A lot of poor countries, for example. And there are countries that have, for example, 0 tariffs against us, like Singapore, for example, the parent company of TikTok. They have a 0% tariff on US goods. But because we're putting a 10% blanket tariff on all countries, now all of a sudden we have 10% tariffs on any imported goods from Singapore, even though they have 0% on any US goods imported to Singapore. So again, doesn't seem very fair. So, that's part of execution. If that was actually explained right away, I think people would, more people would probably say, okay, I get why he's doing that. But because that wasn't explained, and people had to figure it out, And then the White House had to clarify after people figured out, because there was so much outrage. That was part of the failed execution. So, again, is that part of the plan to create mass chaos? Is that why? Right? Because maybe if there was an explanation, it wouldn't be as much chaos. That doesn't make sense. Now, I did hear Lutnick also make a few comments. Lutnick did say, he was questioned on an interview, saying, why are certain countries, like a country that only has penguins, literally being tariffed? He came up with the answer, well, we don't want like countries like China to be like, circumventing our tariffs by like shipping from other countries and this and that. It's sort of an explanation, but it doesn't really explain it or solve it, because, for example, China has a 54% tariff, and Singapore has 10%, and some other unknown country in the world, let's say, has 10%. I mean, even though they have a 10% tariff, it's not 54%. So if that was really the reason, then they should just match it to 54% all around, right? So, I mean, that kind of explains, kind of not. But Lutnick basically said, hey, regardless of what the stock market is doing, the tariffs will continue on. We're not going to back off from it. So he sounds like a person that either has a lot of shorts open, a lot of puts open, and is making a ton of money, so he does not care. Or, he's just saying that because he has to, because of course he is one of the top dogs in the administration. He's the Commerce Secretary. He can't be showing any weakness. If he showed any weakness, that would be absolutely disastrous. Okay, so bottom line is, whether you believe there's a plan going on, I think there is a plan, but whether you believe there's a plan, let me take that back. Let me step it back. So, whether you believe there's a plan or not, I believe there's a plan, but I believe the execution of the plan has been absolutely horrible. Okay, so I'll put it that way. But maybe I'm wrong and there's no plan at all because there's so much chaos, right? So one way or another, we're going through what we're going through. Will this stop anytime soon? The answer is no. The way we are going right now, it's pretty certain that we are not going to see the end of this anytime soon. Now, Jim Cramer, we know inverse Cramer is always right. So this could be a silver lining. Jim Cramer did say over this weekend, either this weekend or Friday, that on Monday, if we don't see any backtracking, we don't see any changes, this Monday will be as bad as Black Monday of 1987. It will be one of the most horrific days of all time, seeing how bad it was Thursday and Friday. Now, because he said that, hopefully on Monday we actually bounce. Right? I do think at some point, I already mentioned this last week, that this week I do think that if we continue to sell off, we're going to get some bounce days. I remember the 2008 recession crash vividly. We had many months of red every single day. And periodically, we just have a few days within a week where we just bounce green. So I anticipate we're probably going to see that. I don't know if it's going to come Monday or not. It could come Monday. Hopefully. But I did mention at the beginning how Bitcoin just crashed $4,000 out of nowhere. So one reason is because it could be whale games just to liquidate the longs. Another reason could be people are preparing for what's to come on Monday. Because obviously Bitcoin is traded 24/7. US markets and markets around the world are not. So a lot of time Bitcoin, what happens to Bitcoin is a precursor of what's to come in markets. So Asian markets are going to open soon. If Asian markets turn out to be completely bloody red once again, then we know our answer. European markets are going to be bloody red, and so will US markets. There's a lot of retaliation right now. China retaliated against US. Europe now retaliated against US as well. So mass retaliation on tariffs all around. So best case scenario is sometime this week we're going to get a couple of green bounce days. But as for Bitcoin, best case scenario is by the time tonight, if we can claw back into the 80s and stay in the low 80s, we don't even have to go higher. Just stay in the low 80s. We get back to where we were, 81, 82. And we can stay there in the entire week while the markets are crashing left and right everywhere. Okay? That would be the best case scenario. That's what we're looking for. Okay? That would be an absolute win. So, I guess let's see what happens. Okay? I know a lot of you guys are looking for, at this point in Junction, you know, probably looking for more crypto news, right? I know a lot of you guys are probably like, George, I want to hear more crypto news. There's really not a whole lot of crypto news I could say. I am looking at, if you're looking at the charts, from the top, like the top 10, I will say Bitcoin is obviously still the strongest. XRP is extremely strong, relatively speaking. Others have become much weaker. Ethereum has gotten really weak, below 1500. Sol has gotten really weak, below 110. Although they do come up quite a lot when Bitcoin does go up. Sui has become quite weak. I have noticed Tron holding very well, but still, I don't trust Tron, so I will never touch Tron. But others have gotten weaker, and alts generally do get weaker during scary times, right? So, but my stance does not change. When it comes to accumulation, still, Bitcoin is the big daddy. Of course, I will continue to DCA Bitcoin. Bitcoin, in my opinion, is still the best asset to hold. And I will continue to accumulate. And I make the case that that BlackRock, Fidelity, Sailor, and all these guys, they continue to accumulate also because they recognize how good it is as well, right? All these guys that have, in this cycle, that have now learned about Bitcoin and have started accumulating, they have not stopped. Okay, even like even some of the new players that have entered the game, and even some of the old billionaires that I haven't talked about for a while. What is it? I forgot their names. There was a couple Wall Street giants that I forgot about. They continue to stack. Oh, I forgot, like, newcomers like Standard Chartered, their CEO, extremely bullish on Bitcoin, has 33% of his wealth in Bitcoin. And you got the Mexican telco billionaire. He has basically all his wealth in Bitcoin as well, his liquid assets in Bitcoin. So you got so many new players in this cycle that have come in because they recognize how good of an asset it is. right? But of course, Bitcoin is not oblivious to the complete, utterly like turmoil that we're in right now, because there are a lot of people that are fearful that will continue to sell, right? So that's why we do see the price movements, and we still see some whale games. That's why we see these massive liquidations and so forth. But my mind will never change about Bitcoin, and I still think that we have a massive opportunity here. Once we find that bottom, man, once the rally starts again from that bottom, it's going to be one of those once in a lifetime opportunities. It really will be. Really will be. And I keep referring to the 2008 recession because, again, the 2020 recession was not really a recession, right? Because of COVID and all the stimulus and everything that happened, it wasn't really a recession. We had mini crashes and that's it. 2008 crash, that was a real crash. We had many months of red. And there was massive despair to the point where like Jim Cramer almost gave up on on TV when Dow, I remember Dow fell to 6,000 points, if you could believe that, and Apple fell to like $88. It was to a point where people were basically giving up. Hopefully this time around we don't get that bad, but hey, people that took advantage at those times made a ton of money. And I think it's going to be one of those opportunities again. But anyways, going back to crypto, Bitcoin is still the big daddy. I will continue accumulating Bitcoin. And all the other crypto, the big caps that I've been supporting, I will accumulate into them, but less so. Primarily these days, just Bitcoin because of how strong it is. And that's it. I mean, that's my new strategy. Still continue to DCA when I can, but more and mostly into Bitcoin these days. But in terms of all the alts, the big caps that I've been mentioning, right? Like XRP, Solana, Sui, and I mentioned like Chainlink, AVAX, some of these guys, Cardano, Hedera, the American-based crypto, right? I think a lot of them will come back strong. A lot of them are quite weak right now, okay? But I think they will find their footing and come back. But primarily these days, just Bitcoin. All right, guys, this week will be quite interesting. I'll be back to my normal schedule. So 8:30 a.m. Central Standard Time. This is a long video, but I had a lot to share. You know, again, I try not to be too political with my videos. There's always two sides of every story. There's a lot of people that hate what Trump is doing, a lot of people that like what Trump is doing. I'm trying to stay focused on investments, on Bitcoin, on markets. I'm trying to present what's happening. So whether you believe there's a plan or not, it's your opinion. So, all right. So I'll see you guys tomorrow, bright and early, 8:30 a.m. Central Standard Time. And let's see if tomorrow's a bounce day or absolutely brutal red day. And let's see how Bitcoin is tonight. Let's see if it could climb back up above 80s and hang in the low 80s once again. All right, have a good one. Take care. Bye-bye.